Hello fellow gardeners, and welcome back to Smart Garden. If you're tuning in, chances are you've been faithfully laying down mulch season after season, maybe even wondering why your garden still struggles with weeds, compaction, or plants that just don't seem to thrive the way you'd hoped. What if I told you there's a revolutionary approach that could transform your garden from the ground up, literally? Today, we're diving deep into the living soil blanket method, a game-changing technique that's about to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about soil health and garden maintenance. The mulch trap, why it's holding your garden back. For decades, we've been told that mulch is the answer to nearly every garden problem. Need to suppress weeds, add mulch, want to retain moisture, layer on more mulch. But here's what nobody talks about. Traditional mulch can actually create more problems than it solves. When you pile wood chips, bark, or straw onto your soil, you're creating a static barrier that does more than just sit there looking tidy. That organic material begins decomposing from the top down, and as it breaks down, it temporarily locks up nitrogen that your plants desperately need. The microorganisms responsible for decomposition pull nitrogen from the surrounding soil to do their work, creating what's known as nitrogen tie-up. Your plants end up competing with decomposers for this essential nutrient, leading to yellowing leaves and stunted growth even when you think you're doing everything right. Beyond nutrient issues, traditional mulch creates the perfect hiding spots for slugs, snails, and various garden pests that love the cool, damp environment underneath those wood chips. I've seen countless gardens where gardeners meticulously apply fresh mulch each spring only to find their prized hostas and vegetables decimated by slug damage. Furthermore, when mulch becomes matted down from rain and foot traffic, it can form an almost impermeable layer that prevents water from reaching the soil beneath. Instead of helping with moisture retention, compacted mulch can actually shed water away from plant roots, creating drought conditions even after a good rain. We've been conditioned to believe that a thick layer of mulch is the hallmark of a well-maintained garden, but this conventional wisdom deserves a serious second look. Introducing the living soil blanket, a paradigm shift. So what exactly is a living soil blanket? Imagine replacing that static layer of decomposing material with a dynamic, breathing ecosystem of carefully selected plants that work in harmony with your main crops. This isn't just about throwing down some clover and hoping for the best. A true living soil blanket is a thoughtfully designed system of ground covers, nitrogen fixers, and dynamic accumulators that create continuous plant cover throughout your garden beds. The fundamental difference between traditional mulch and a living blanket is that one is dying while the other is actively growing, feeding, and improving your soil 24 hours a day. The core principles are elegantly simple, yet profoundly powerful. First, you maintain continuous plant cover, ensuring that bare soil is never exposed to the elements or vulnerable to weed invasion. Second, you incorporate diverse root systems that work at different soil depths, creating channels for air and water movement while accessing nutrients from various soil layers. Third, and perhaps most importantly, you cultivate active soil biology through living root exudates that feed beneficial microorganisms constantly. When you visualize the difference, picture this. Traditional mulch sits on top of your soil like a blanket on a sleeping person, doing nothing to engage with what's underneath. A living soil blanket, by contrast, is like a thriving coral reef with countless organisms interacting, trading nutrients, protecting each other, and building resilience into every square inch of your garden ecosystem. The magic of living soil blankets happens underground, in a world invisible to the naked eye but absolutely crucial to plant health. As living plants photosynthesize, they don't just build stems and leaves above ground, they actively pump up to 30% of the sugars and proteins they create, down into the soil through their roots in the form of exudates. These root exudates are essentially the currency of the soil food web, attracting and feeding billions of beneficial bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. This isn't a one-way transaction either. Those microbes break down organic matter and minerals in the soil, making nutrients available to plants in exchange for those sweet exudates. It's a sophisticated underground economy that functions beautifully when we work with it rather than against it. One of the most remarkable players in this system is mycorrhizal fungi, which form symbiotic relationships with plant roots, extending the effective root system by hundreds or even thousands of times. These fungal networks act like an underground internet, connecting plants throughout your garden and allowing them to share water, nutrients, and even warning signals about pest attacks. When you maintain a living soil blanket with diverse plant species, you're not just feeding one or two plant types, you're supporting an entire mycorrhizal superhighway that benefits everything growing in that space. Additionally, the constant presence of living roots and the improved soil structure they create means your soil can hold significantly more water than dead mulch ever could. Living roots create channels and pore spaces that allow water to infiltrate deeply, while the increased organic matter from constant root turnover acts like a sponge, holding moisture available to plants during dry spells. Temperature regulation also improves dramatically because actively growing plants transpire water through their leaves, creating a cooling effect during hot weather, while the root systems insulate the soil from temperature extremes. Making the transition from traditional mulch to a living soil blanket doesn't have to happen overnight, and in fact, it's often better to start small and expand as you gain confidence. If you currently have mulched beds, you can begin by pulling back the mulch in select areas and interplanting with appropriate ground cover species. White clover is an excellent starting point for most gardeners because it's incredibly forgiving, fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere, and tolerates foot traffic reasonably well. You can broadcast clover seed directly onto your garden beds between your main crops, and within a few weeks, you'll have a living carpet that never needs replacing. For vegetable gardens, consider using a mixture of low-growing plants that serve different functions in your ecosystem. Crimson clover works beautifully as an annual that you can plant in fall, allow to grow through winter, and then chop and drop in spring before planting your warm season crops. The nitrogen it's fixed during its growth period becomes immediately available to your vegetables. Daikon radishes are absolute champions at breaking up compacted soil with their massive taproots, which can penetrate 2 feet deep or more. Plant these in late summer or fall, and when you cut them down, the taproot channels they've created become highways for water and air movement, while the radish biomass feeds soil organisms as it decomposes. For perennial garden beds, mixing low-growing perennials like creeping thyme, ajuga, or native ground covers creates a permanent living blanket that requires minimal maintenance once established. The most common concern when implementing a living soil blanket is that it might compete with your main crops for resources, but this rarely becomes an issue if you choose compatible species and manage them appropriately. The key is selecting plants that occupy a different niche than your main crops, ground covers that stay low and don't shade out taller plants, and deep-rooted accumulators that mine nutrients from soil layers your vegetables aren't accessing. During the establishment phase, you may need to do some hand weeding as the living blanket fills in, but once it's dense, weed pressure drops dramatically because there's simply no room for unwanted plants to establish. Initial expectations should be realistic. A living soil blanket becomes more effective with each passing season as the soil biology builds and the system matures. The first year, you're laying groundwork. By the second and third years, you'll notice dramatically improved soil structure, reduced watering needs, and plants with a vigor you've never seen before. The benefits of adopting a living soil blanket approach extend far beyond the boundaries of your garden beds. Over time, you'll find that your soil fertility increases year after year without the need for heavy fertilizer inputs because the system is building its own fertility through nitrogen fixation, nutrient cycling, and continuous organic matter addition from root turnover. You'll spend less money on amendments, less time watering, and far less energy fighting weeds and pests. The resilience of your garden improves too. Plants growing in biologically active soil with strong mycorrhizal connections can withstand drought, disease, and pest pressure far better than plants in lifeless mulch soil. But here's what really matters. Your small garden is actually a microcosm of a much larger movement happening across the globe. As climate change and soil degradation threaten food security worldwide, regenerative practices like living soil blankets offer a path forward. Every square foot of soil you regenerate in your backyard contributes to carbon sequestration, reduces the need for resource-intensive inputs, and demonstrates that there's a better way to work with nature rather than against it. You're not just growing vegetables or flowers, you're participating in the restoration of our planet's living skin, one garden at a time. The living soil revolution is happening right now, and you have the power to be part of it. Start small, experiment, observe what works in your unique conditions, and share your experiences with other gardeners. If you found value in this deep dive into living soil blankets, I'd love for you to subscribe to Smart Garden and share this video with fellow gardeners who are ready to level up their soil health game. Together, we can ditch the mulch and embrace the living, breathing ecosystem our gardens were always meant to be. Happy gardening!